Happening now, we want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 193. 193, we're almost at 200 for October 7th, 2020. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the fabulous University of Montana campus right here in Missoula, Montana. And joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Wes Fryer.
Good evening, Jason. I am happy to be joining tonight, and I am the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at the Cassidy School here in Oklahoma City. We are looking forward to a couple days for fall break, which historically falls on UT-OU weekend, and so tomorrow is the end of the work week. So that is a lovely, lovely thing. So have fires subsided as the COVID rages, or are both engulfing the state of Montana in flames as we speak?
I do not know of any active fires in Montana, and then secondarily, we haven't had as much of the West Coast smoke as we thought we might when I reported last week. So the weather has been in the mid-70s, will be actually for the next week or so, and I expect some real fall weather to head in our direction. October, snow can come at any time. We've had July 4 snow in the state of Montana before. So, it obviously is a very diverse weather system here in the state. But we'll start probably getting more cool weather. And I would expect, we've had early freezes before, well before October, but I'll expect our first hard freeze probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks here in Big Sky Country.
I think we hit 89 today, so we are having another little bloom of heat, and then we'll probably get some cooler temperatures. But I don't think we're here to talk weather. I think the rumor is that there's some technology news. Is that an accurate rumor for this show, Dr.
I think it is. I mean, we could get some podiums up and try to recreate what's going on in Salt Lake City, Utah tonight, plexiglass-based debate, but I think we'll just stick with tech issues because, frankly, it's a lot more interesting to talk about. And as usual, EdTech Situation Room is a podcast where we take tech news and kind of shoot it through the education prism and see if we can get some insight for those in the education K through higher ed industries. Tonight, we'll be talking about broadband, big tech, media, Google, Apple, social media, the tech correction, as we talk about often on the show, the impact of COVID, artificial intelligence security, and then our favorite topic every week, miscellaneous. But, Dr. Fryer, where would you like to start tonight?
Well, I will admit I was watching these debates before I joined, but if that's the beautiful thing about being able to catch the podcast late. So this is all recorded. Why don't we start with some tech correction articles? Actually, the first is not a current news article. It's actually a TED Talk from August of 2020, but it is a fantastic exposition of the ways in which our social media companies need to respond and in all likelihood be regulated, which I know that is a scary idea to a lot of us, but this is by Yael Eisenstadt, and she was a former CIA either analyst or operator, anyway, employee of the CIA. She worked for a brief bit for Facebook. The title of her TED Talk from August 2020 is Dear Facebook, This is How You Are Breaking Democracy. Absolutely fantastic. I've mentioned that The Social Dilemma, which is poised, and I don't know if it actually did achieve, it was poised to be the #1 video on Netflix in the month of September. It would be the first documentary to ever reach that status. I think is an outstanding exposition of the multitude of issues surrounding the ways in which the technology companies, the social media companies particularly, are affecting us as individuals and as a society. This is a great TED Talk that really sets a lot of things up. And so some of the other articles I put in there today, both two are from Mozilla. So the Mozilla Foundation, that is the organization which maintains Firefox and has done a variety of other kinds of projects, has a couple petitions that are open right now. The first one, man, if I cannot choke. The first one is called untrend Twitter. And it's saying that, Twitter, and specifically with trending hashtags and topics, is continuing to be ripe for weaponization and for manipulation. And so at least until the election results in the United States are certified, they say in January of 2021, which is perhaps a bit foreboding, that Twitter needs to take off its trending topics features. And then similarly, they've got another petition that's out, and it's to stop group recommendations. And so even though Facebook has taken, and this will be my next article, and then I'll kick it to you, Jason, they have taken some pretty decisive action against QAnon, which we have talked about on this podcast, and is what I would consider Fruit Loop, sort of Looney Tune conspiracy theory that, crazily enough, a number of successful candidates for elective office in the United States have won primary elections who are endorsing QAnon. Facebook, and I'll jump this in. This was NBC News on August 6th. Facebook bans QAnon across its platforms, and some of the other social media posts I saw, we're talking thousands of groups that are being shut down. This is a substantial thing. Mozilla is calling on Facebook to still stop recommending groups because they have, been a huge factor in the growth of these fringe extremist groups, spouting conspiracy theories and, promoting violence and really, continuing to pollute our information landscape with disinformation and misinformation. So I think the article from NBC News is positive. I'm glad to see Facebook taking what appears to be some genuinely aggressive action. But I think the Mozilla Foundation is on the right target, and that's kind of what's set up in that whole TED Talk, that we need to have some substantial changes to the platforms. And I think those specific suggestions of turning off trending topics on Twitter until after the election at least, and then doing away with the group recommendations, could go a long way in trying to curb some of the spread of disinformation and harmful messages. So your thoughts, Dr. Neiffer, because I'm going to bet there may be just a few advocates of some of these groups, up in your country. I know that we have a few of them here in Oklahoma.
Well, so it's really interesting because you mentioned something early on with one of the earlier articles that it's kind of foreboding what is happening right now in regards to the notion of what happens on the election day or the days after. And then you mentioned going all the way until electors vote later on in the cycle. And I think that is something that is very concerning, because the other article that came out today was that Facebook, which had announced last week, and I can't remember if we talked about this or not, Facebook has banned any ads declaring victory on election day, and now they've taken that a step further to say that they're going to ban any political ad on Facebook on election day. To be honest, if Facebook really wanted to do us a solid here, I think they should just ban political advertising in general from this point on, right? I think that we've proven beyond a reasonable doubt at this point that Facebook is not acting in our best interest as regards to elections. And I have another article that's related to that I'll talk about in a moment. But the bottom line is that I think we need to be very cautious here as information consumers. And also, if you're politically connected, right? And by connected, I mean you're into the conversations, you are a connected voter, you are thinking about, acting upon information, then we need to be very diligent in not only policing mis or disinformation, but also helping our family and friends do so as well. And I think one of the things that's been proven is that the diversity of media sources, many of which allow folks that are against the public interest to express their views, seem to be weighted equally by a lot of people than traditional media sources. And I think we need to be both concerned about that and take proactive action to help combat the disinformation. And, we've talked about it a lot in the past. Obviously, when we started talking about the tech correction in 2016 on this podcast, we didn't even begin to understand the true impact that these services and platforms are having on our democracy. I kind of laugh a little bit at the Cambridge Analytica scandal now, because that seems almost delightfully innocent in comparison to what I think is happening on a lot of these social media networks. At some point, they're going to be regulated, I think. I prefer it to be self-regulation and open, transparent regulation, but I don't think that's been enough to work. So let me share two related articles to that. First, The Verge reported October 2nd that Amazon has been working really hard to crack down on fraudulent reviews. And it's something we've talked about here in the past. In fact, I've shared one of my favorite tools for that, which is the fake checker that you can install onto your Chrome browser, and it will allow you to see if Amazon reviews are sneaky looking. And that's a really great, I think the official name of it's Fake Spot, and it helps you spot fake reviews. But what's happening now is that Amazon is effective enough that fake reviewers are actually just kind of pseudo spamming Facebook with fake reviews that send you to Amazon, and it's becoming an effective strategy for putting out bad information about either unreviewed or poorly reviewed products that's creating a situation for all involved. And obviously that just highlights how challenging that this is, right? That we have this extraordinary amount of platform available to us, and not all of this is always going to be, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, on the up and up, right? There's always going to be bad actors here that we need to be very cautious of. But that also relates then to another article that was just released today. This is from Recode. The Congress has released a report in regards to all of those big tech hearings they've held, and the report comes to a lot of conclusions, but the master conclusion is that the big tech firms, and the ones they keep referring to are the big four, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, but they are engaged in anti-competitive practices. And I'll say that there's a lot to come. I know this report will be dug through and analyzed to a great extent, so we can talk about that in detail later. But one of the things I've talked about here on the past, or here on the podcast in the past, is that one of the reasons why I have chosen not to leave Facebook, right, is that I would miss my connection with friends and family there, especially in the era of COVID, especially since I don't really see a lot of people on the outside during this quarantine time for me. Facebook has been a real lifeline for me. But if I go to another platform, my friends and family aren't there. I mean, there are dozens of alternative Facebook-like platforms. Wes and I have probably talked about a half dozen in the last couple of years on the show. They're interesting. They probably have safety in mind, but the bottom line is that unless your friends are there, who cares, right? Like that becomes part of that. So these things are all starting to kind of swirl together, but no matter what the results are of the November 3rd election, no matter what the future of the pandemic is, no matter what the future of virtual schooling is, all of these things are going to come to a head at some point. And I think you're going to see big tech and also a lot of these very popular platforms, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, change dramatically. I hope it's for the better. I hope it's a transparent change, but we'll have to see.
I don't have this in the show because it touches on these articles, but there was a really great podcast I listened to on the Ezra Klein show by a gentleman who's written a book about basically, legally reforming our political system to more of a proportional representation model, and ways that we can reform. And I think that when we moved to Oklahoma in 2006, AT&T was just merging with T-Mobile. That was right before the iPhone. We've had an era of lots and lots of big fish eating the smaller fish, and bigger companies. We really haven't had what in the United States has been referred to as antitrust legislation. And that was called antitrust and not anti-corporation, really because of the Standard Oil Trust. So it is going to be pretty interesting to see what happens with the election, not only with the U.S. president, but also with houses of Congress. We do tend to see just a whole lot of gridlock and a whole lot of inability to do much change, even pass a budget. But these kinds of changes are very much going to hinge upon larger political changes, if those happen, in who has power. And it's going to be, these companies are so wealthy. Like the Silicon Valley companies are the most wealthy companies that have ever existed in the history of our planet. And the economic model upon which they are thriving today, financially, is what is causing so many of these issues. So I personally am rather pessimistic that we're going to see any kind of substantive changes quickly, but I am heartened by the way in which a number of people seem to be articulating the issues, connecting the dots. I've mentioned that on the show before. It's one of the best things about getting together with Jason, in addition to seeing how the hair is growing and, just the transformation, folks. I mean, you all have heard about sightings of, folks with a lot of hair in the mountains, in the mountains of, the United States. But in all seriousness, it is important to try to connect dots. And there's all these current events and these different things happening. And I am, again, encouraged by the way in which some really smart people seem to be articulating things well. But I don't think that's going to lead to decisive, large changes in the ways that these platforms operate and the ways, and really, frankly, the impacts that they have on society. But it's good to see some actions being taken. But as we've, I think, sort of said with some foreboding and, I don't know what the words are, trepidation, whatever, it's possible. And you mentioned Cambridge Analytica looking kind of cute, that the kinds of effects that will happen on our electoral process and on our culture as a result of these powerful tools will dwarf what appeared to happen in 2016. And, there's hand wringing to be done, but there's also, educational work to be done with students and with parents and with we all bear responsibilities, as we can all share. So hopefully the ideas that we're discussing here and talking about don't just stay here. These are things that we're talking with others about, and we are finding some practical tools to, take some steps in our own personal lives to try and figure out how, what decisions we're going to make about these kinds of tools, and then also the kinds of groups that we might support, the kind of advocacy that we're going to try to be a part of, as citizens and folks that have a voice.
Yep, absolutely so. And, there's a reason why social media caught on, right? There's a serious amount of addiction to it. But I think if we created these tools, we can also recreate these tools in a way that are productive for us as a society and not destructive. And I guess that's what I continue to hope.
Let me segue quickly to a miscellaneous, and then take us where you'd like, because this is
Sure.
just a perfect connection, and because I had to put it under miscellaneous. I don't actually know the date, which is always weird, of an article, because you're like, this is kind of weird. And it is a Fast Company article, which, as I mentioned, I was approached by them if I wanted to pay, or my employer wanted to pay so that I could be an author for them. Anyway, the article is called "We Are Approaching the Fastest, Deepest, Most Consequential Technological Disruption in History." It's by Tony Seba and James, I guess Arbib is how you say his last name. Yes. And the gist of this article is that all of these the confluence, the combination of all these different factors coming together, where and sort of, this is from the social dilemma. They talk about how we're sort of living in utopia and dystopia at the same time. So many positives, right? I don't want to give up Facebook either. I mean, I'm connected in ways that I treasure, but at the same time, I don't want to see it, completely subvert democracy and democratic processes in our country or elsewhere in the world. This article really makes the case that the decisions that leaders are going to make about these technologies, about artificial intelligence, about the ways in which we're going to, try and protect privacy rights or not, try and rein in companies or not, these are going to have a lot of consequences for the future. And it's an optimistic piece, and the authors have written a whole book about this topic. But it really is trying to put forth a policy agenda to say we need smart elected officials that are going to make some good choices, now and in the years to come, because the stakes are high. And these technologies, and we haven't ever really talked that much about biotechnology in terms of agriculture and things, but there's phenomenal advances that are happening, and we really do need smart folks that are well informed who can make, responsible, hopefully, and very positive decisions about these things so that we go in the right direction. So anyway, we have now covered the miscellaneous topic. Dr. Neiffer, where shall we go next?
Well, I wanted to mention a couple other quick items in regards to social media, just very quickly. The Verge report on October 6th that we're not going to talk about the politics of this, but obviously the big news of the last week was that President Trump had been tested positive of the coronavirus. But the interesting thing about that is obviously social media exploded in the days after that. And Twitter had to remind its users that they do not condone or accept death threats or wishes of violence on others, which I agree that should apply to everyone on social media all the time. And as it turns out, that stance has been somewhat inconsistently enforced. And four freshman representatives known as the Squad includes AOC and Eamon Omar and other prominent freshman House women in the House of Representatives said that they've received constant threats of violence, including death threats, as part of their work. I mean, they're members of the U.S. House of Representatives and have received a constant barrage of death threats. And in fact, I see a lot on Twitter that when prominent women speak out, when prominent women step out in favor of equal rights and really human rights, that they oftentimes are subjected to a barrage of terrible comments and death threats. And I only want to mention to say that while I also agree it's inappropriate to wish ill upon the President of the United States, I don't care who's in that office, the bottom line is that social media should not allow that against anyone. And I hope that as we talk about these tools, and I hope as you talk about these tools inside the classroom, threatening the President of the United States happens to be against the law, but threatening anyone is against our humanity. And I think we need to be very careful in how we discuss those things with our students and make the bottom line in that we can be civil even if we disagree and as we're engaging with one another. So just want to make that one last broad thought there. So several Google updates have happened in the last couple of days that I want to mention. First and foremost, the big one today, Tech Radar reports that Google is rebranding yet again. It started as Google Apps, then it became the Google Suite, and now it's Google Workplace. And a lot of people have framed this article in kind of a weird way. Tech Radar talks about how the big change isn't going to happen for a couple of months for enterprise and Google education users, but eventually it'll be so like Google Workplace for education or something along those lines. I don't really like that terminology. I think it's kind of silly, but whatever. It's just a name, right? But the other piece of it that's super interesting here is that there's clearly an attempt on Google to go after more enterprise folks. That's what I'm reading out of this. And it's including several new features that will be rolling out in coming months. One of them is trying to prioritize Google collaboration in things like documents, spreadsheets, and presentations while you're in Google Meets, which are the technology platform that Google uses for video conferencing. And, for me, collaboration has always been a big part of the Google apps, right? Going back to 2006 and 2007, when they started allowing people to collaboratively work on documents together, which is what brought me over to their side of this equation in the first place. They are now looking to ways to do more live interaction with one another as people collaborate with one another. So I thought that was an interesting thing. And then a couple other articles I wanted to mention. Actually, let's stop there for a second. Wes, I know that you are part of a Google Apps school. Google Suites. A Google Workplace school, right? Any thoughts about this as a recovering tech director or as a Google advocate in your part of the educational world?
Man, it's super interesting to see these kinds of branding things, right? Google bought Nest, and so Google Wi-Fi, has become Nest Wi-Fi, which that's small compared to renaming G Suite. I don't know. My first thought is it just shows the speed of change that we have, the technology environment, and we have a Google certification group that we've met 3 times now to encourage the taking of the Google Certified Educator exams and those kind of things. I don't know. Maybe this is not going to be such a substantial practical change for us in the classroom. Once teachers are getting familiar with different things like that, it is interesting as you're having to try to, come up, build familiarity with different kinds of terms and phrases. But some of the things, and you've got another article about Drive file stream, and I don't know, it's good that all these things are improving, right? Because we want to continue to have better and better tools. Competition is good. I think the fact that Microsoft is a player in all this, they are not just, by the sidelines, just being completely decimated, 365 and Teams and these tools that Microsoft has are, I think, probably large drivers of the innovation and the ways that we see Google continuing to push all this forward. So, I mean, I haven't stopped loving the Google Kool-Aid, but it is a bit weird to see some major changes in tools and what we call ourselves, right? Because we've called ourselves, a Google, I don't know, Giuseppe, whatever. We've used these acronyms and talked about G Suite for quite a while. So hopefully that's going to not be that big of a change. And if it means that Google's going to continue to get better and they're going to continue to grow, I mean, in the midst of talking about monopolies and the ways in which monopolistic effects are happening in the workplace, I mean, Google is a net positive for our school. So I don't know that the name changes are going to have that much of an effect, but things like seeing 50 folks simultaneously in grid view, having a blurred background, which I used for the first time today with a student that I was checking in with, and different kinds of feature updates. That stuff all sounds positive. So I'm glad to see the march of Google innovating and moving forward. It is going to be a little weird to not say G Suite, but
yep,
we'll get used to it.
Well, and I'm still calling it Google Apps, so that's my problem. So, okay, here's another great article. This one I think is huge. Chrome Unboxed reported on October 3rd that Google Suite file stream is now available for personal Gmail accounts to sync Drive with their PC or Mac. And I have to say, I think this is amazing and may actually change the way I do a little bit of computing. So for those of you that aren't aware of how the file stream works, 3 years ago, Google started messing a little bit with the native Google Drive app, which is an app you can download to your Mac or PC and access your Google Drive like you would any other drive on your PC. But the problem with that was that you had to choose to sync or not sync or something. Like you basically want to download everything onto your computer so you'd have it available to you locally. And that's nice because it's fast, but I have 17 terabytes of Google files sitting at work because I have a lot of archives that I save on my work account. So it's not an option for me to to download all those to my local computer. And so what Google Stream allows you to do is just like Google Drive, it allows you to log into it using your Google account, but then it doesn't download anything. It downloads it only as you need it, or you can ask it to store it on your local machine, like if you're about ready to jump on an airplane, which is really the only time I can think of that you wouldn't generally have access to the cloud to be able to get those files. And it's been a real game changer for me. It's the first thing I download on a new PC or Mac, and to have that available in the personal account, I think is magical. And so if you've not discovered that yet, chances are you have, because if you're using Google Drive for work, that's probably what your IT people are pushing to install on your Mac or PC, because it makes a lot of sense from a bandwidth standpoint. But man, really excellent news. And then a couple other hardware pieces of news. Chrome Unboxed also reported that CTL has released a new version of their Chrome box. And I own one of the last generations of these, and it is a wonderful piece of hardware. In fact, I brought mine home a couple of weeks ago that was sitting in my office and decided that it would do me better instead of literally gathering dust on it at work. But this is my CTL Chrome box. I love this thing. It's my primary desktop computer for work, and it has two monitor ports in it and an Ethernet port, and it's got an i7 chip in it and 16 gigs of RAM. It's a great machine that does anything I throw at it. The reason why I mention this is because they've got a new edition out with a fresh 10th generation i7 chip and up to 64 gigs of RAM. You do not need 64 gigs of RAM to run Chrome OS, but I will tell you that Chrome OS really does sing along at 16 gigabytes of RAM. And I have to say, my home system, I've got a 4K monitor now, and I have a side monitor that's flipped over on its side. That's a 1080p monitor. It can push both monitors, so no slowdown with those number of pixels out of there, and it runs it at 60 hertz. And so it is a beautiful implementation of that. So CTL, good on you.
Well, and I'll say this as far as Chrome boxes. So I became our tech director at our school in 2015. At that time we were basically cycling tech every 5 years. Anyway, we had library computers up for refresh. One of the decisions we made was to stop putting Windows out of these systems, because they're basically just accessing web pages that have our card catalog and resources for the students who are doing some web research. And why have a full-blown Windows system and running at that time antivirus and just all the updates and everything? And so we pulled those out, put Chrome boxes in, and it was beautiful. I think it's been a phenomenal success. Now, because of COVID, we actually took our head librarian chose to take all those out, understandably. And now all of our kids have devices. I mean, we finally have the move. So every student has a device at our elementary, our middle, and our high school. And we were a little late to that. But Chrome boxes, yes, fantastic, incredible. And I will say this on the drive file stream issue, and thinking also just about Chrome. When my wife taught for 4 years at a school downtown called Positive Tomorrows, she did not have a laptop. They gave her a Windows PC in her classroom. So we bought her a Chromebook, and she learned really as she was going back into the classroom after a number of years out, just how to work on Chrome. And when she came to our school 3 years ago now, we have a MacBook Air as the daily carry. But as I look at her and her computing, I think she was thriving even more in the Chrome environment. And while I think a number of folks have looked down on Chrome devices, and I've spent a lot of time with Apple people too. I love my Apple stuff, right? I love my Mac. I mean, I've got Macs all over the place. But the value of the power and the simplicity of Chrome and the security and so many different features, it's just phenomenal. So if you have not looked at Chrome boxes as a solution in places like your library, if you're not experimenting with the power of current generation, Chromebook devices and Chrome devices. I've mentioned this before. We're in the midst of a pretty big test, which, the current plan was to swap iPads and Chromebooks with 6th grade and 7th grade and give teachers chances to do both. So we don't have a commitment right now on where we're going to be going in our middle school with our device. I mean, either way, it's going to be powerful. It's going to be better than anything that, pretty much anyone has ever used at school before if we're getting a new device. But I definitely have just rave reviews to share, not only for, Google things in general, but I mean, Chrome Bits, which we implemented for digital signage, which are, incredibly powerful. Yep. We put those out about 3 years ago. And then the Chrome boxes, just, lots and lots of great power, simplicity, security, manageability, all the things you really want as a tech director. And Google's not even paying me to say that, and neither is Jason.
Yep. And again, I'll say I use a Chromebook full time, right? I switch back and forth right now at home, in part because of in support of our Windows users, right? That's where the reason why I switched to Chrome in the first place was in support of our Chrome users. Well, I've got a pretty good handle on the Chrome environment now. I can do 98% of what I do as a power user easily, and actually I prefer to do it on the Chrome OS architecture because it's simplistic and it just works, which I think that phrase is usually reserved for another platform, but we'll leave that alone. One more update for tonight that's really just for me and Wes, but 9 to 5 Google reports that Google Wi-Fi updated Google Wi-Fi is out, and it's hard to tell if the hardware is updated or not. There's an extensive article from 9 to 5 Google that talks about this. It looks like that there are two brands now. It's Google Wi-Fi and Nest Wi-Fi, and the Nest Wi-Fi is slightly more powerful hardware, but Wes and I have recommended over and over again, in fact, we're probably both utilizing it right now, that Google Wi-Fi, you can start with one for $99, and then if your house is bigger and you find that there are areas of your house that are not getting the Wi-Fi access, you can buy a second, third, or fourth and create what's referred to as a mesh network, which can then saturate your house with Wi-Fi signals. So Google Wi-Fi still very much supported by our friends at the Googs.
I'll do one quick comment back to your Google G Suite file stream. I don't know how many of us are working with teachers or others, family members, on this whole thing about local files and cloud files. And for folks who have come up in the world of a Finder on the Mac side or the file manager on the Windows side, it can make a lot more sense. Shared drives, old Windows, file sharing and things like that can make a lot more sense to work in that windowed environment than to work in the environment of just the web, with the Chrome browser. I am glad to see, again, the continued, innovation and improvements that Google is making in this respect. I think it's in some ways just hard, though, to live in both environments. I've just come to appreciate, and a lot of this is, my wife teaches third grade at our school, and I end up giving her probably more tech, I give her more tech support than anybody else in my life. It is so important that we spend time with teachers on basics of file management, of file organization.
Yep.
We are doing more in the cloud and in hybrid, virtual, flex. There's all these different, words, but man, the cloud and technology, it's one of these things that we shouldn't assume that people connect all these dots about how these things work. And I really think it's important that we spend time, helping with those kinds of foundational things, especially being organized, with files and things like that. So hopefully the Drive file stream is going to be of help. And anyway, it's one of those things too that we need to recognize people are in. And you can't see this. This isn't an augmented reality thing where you can take out your phone and look at, oh, look, I can see that you're not really getting this whole thing of cloud storage and local files and downloaded files and uploaded. We've got my lesson I just finished with my fifth graders is a Minecraft screencasting project. We had to use the Macs because we have older Chromebooks and they can't run, the latest Minecraft Education Edition. But seeing the light bulb come on with kids finally that, yes, the guest account deletes everything here. If it's not in the cloud, it's not saved. And anyway, these are really important foundational concepts, and they're latent inside that article when we talk about things and we flip words out like Google Drive file stream and whatever the other one was, just the backup and sync and those sorts of things. It's important to invest in helping our teachers and probably also family members understand where their stuff is saved, how they access it, what the cloud means. And then I would also say on the backup front, we have more teachers now saving all their stuff in the Google Cloud than ever before. That is a beautiful thing if you are a support person, because one of the last things that you want to, work with somebody through is the fact that their hard drive crashed or something bad happened and things were not backed up. And so it's a wonderful thing to be living in the cloud, but these things that require, I think, and need a substantial investment in helping folks understand and organize and utilize from a productivity standpoint these platforms.
Right. And by the way, I have not lost a file. I can't remember the last time I lost a file. Right. My computer could literally just blow up right now and I'd be like, well, that sucks. And then I would log into another computer and all my stuff would be there. Right. And you just think about 20 years ago and, how common it was for people to constantly lose files. Right?
Oh, my gosh.
And
absolutely.
That's just not a reality in 2020 if you play your cards right.
And with cloud backup, and even if I'm loving my Google Photos. I have my stuff actually backed up to iCloud and Google Photos. I do have a Wi-Fi question follow-up for you though, Jason. I know you mentioned a while back that having different iteration or different sort of model years of the Google Wi-Fi might cause some issues. And I think I remember that as far as not having the same generation device. Do you see a reason to go ahead and upgrade at this point? I know you get a built-in smart speaker, I think, with these now, with the Nest Wi-Fis.
Right.
But have you read and gotten into the technical enough to know, will we see a significant worth the cost improvement in function if we would move up from, say, 2 years ago's Google Wi-Fi?
I suspected that might have been an issue at my house, and for those that have listened on and off on the podcast, I for some reason I've had problems getting the ideal network going in my house. And one thing I've had to do, I did end up putting a hardwired network in using IP over Ethernet over power.
Oh, okay.
So, and I have 400 down now from my 400 megabits down from my cable provider, and I can get about 180 of those across the house over the power or Ethernet over power. Wi-Fi was only giving me about 100 down, and I suspected it should have been much higher than that because these Wi-Fi devices are capable of 10 times that. I'm not entirely sure. I think there's something about the construction of my home that makes Wi-Fi challenging, but I have read that that's the case. But that said, I mean, unless you're experiencing issues, I would suspect. In fact, I just sent all of the older Google Wi-Fi hardware that I had that I depreciated and updated to the stuff that is in the last 3 years. I just sent my older stuff to my sister, who had been using the cable company's router and Wi-Fi router, and it was terrible, and they were having dropped Zoom sessions and stuff, and they set it up, and it's working great. They noticed an immediate difference between the previous Wi-Fi and the current Wi-Fi, and they're an education house. She's a 4th grade teacher, her husband's a principal, and her youngest daughter's still at home, and she's a junior in high school, and they were having concurrent Zoom meetings and needed something more rock stable. So I would say, unless you're experiencing issues, I wouldn't upgrade right away. And plus, in 6 months and a year, I would imagine the $99 hardware, which I think is the price of both the Nest Wi-Fi and the Google Wi-Fi, that's going to be down to $79 or $69 on sale, and I would wait.
The speakers have gone up in price. The minis are no longer, I don't think, available for $30. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But yeah, I think that your point is great about holding off for some sales, because there will be sales, and Black Friday and these other times when stuff always comes down. If you can hold off and wait, then you're not going to pay today's list price.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. Thank you for indulging me with that question.
Yes, of course. Well, let's see. We've got about 15 minutes left. I would like to talk about, let's go ahead and throw Apple a quick bone here. Next week, iPhone 12 is what everyone assumes the next iPhone is going to be. They're going to announce it on Tuesday. And, the leaks have been, as they are, not necessarily consistent. So there's some question about what the hardware will contain. I know a lot of my iPhone 11 owning friends. I've been extremely happy with the iPhone 11 because it's been a very hardy, stable platform. I guess, is there anything, Wes? I know you're rocking an iPhone 8 right now. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yep. Is there anything about an iPhone 12 that would have you running to the store on day one to purchase it?
No, because I'm really going to wait for 5G, right? And so 5G is not just going to be your end user device. It's the network and its availability in your area, and the whole build out of that. So I think my strategy is pretty really happy with the function of my current phone. Probably going to wait for 5G, which is that's probably a few years away. I don't know. We'll see, but no. I think I'm going to be fine to get that update, and I think with the iPhone 8, I mean, I'm totally within the window of continuing to get iOS updates. When you start to be left behind by the updates, I mean, that's when you definitely, I think, need to look at getting a new device. But I don't know that we've had the word of plateau or whatever, but we've reached this point of function where the SE, which is Apple's base model new phone, it's incredible. I mean, the function is fantastic, and I love the camera because I don't have portrait mode on my 8. I will sometimes borrow my daughter, who I gave the 11 Pro to, use her phone. But I mean, I was shooting pictures at her volleyball game last night, with my 8, and it's freaking amazing. It's great. So I think the function that we have and the speed is just so fantastic that, yeah, if you're an aficionado and you just got to have the latest thing or whatever, but hey, I'll also say, I think you're falling prey to the, consumer trap, and you're just being manipulated by Apple's propaganda. So.
Right. And we assume that the high speed is referring to iPhone 5G, right? That has to be what the reference
absolutely.
is, right?
Yeah, the network. Yeah. I mean, the promise of network speed on 5G networks, it's just stunning. I mean, it's like, is that actually the right number and the right speed I'm reading? Because it sounds to me crazy that an individual is going to walk into a school, for instance, with far more bandwidth than the entire campus has ever had, and who knows how the fiber and landline networks are going to respond when those kind of speeds happen. The crazy thing to think about, though, is we're having all these issues and problems with like democracy and governance and the weaponization of social media. This book I still haven't finished, but I'm continuing to read, called Like War, which I highly recommend. What is it going to look like when the network is 10 times faster, 50 times faster? I mean, that's not going to solve the issues. It's going to increase the velocity with which these things happen even more.
Yep. And I would also add, too, that I would just like it if the 4G LTE network worked a little more consistently, right? Mm-hmm. And your point, Wes, about the build out of the network, I don't think there's even a 5G tower in Montana yet. So
yeah.
I'm not holding my breath.
Honestly, Elon Musk may bring you internet before 5G does. And when it does, maybe it'll be more reliable. I mean, who knows? So that's the thing, that when you're connecting dots and you're looking at the future and where we're going, I mean, we're, short of some kind of apocalyptic existential threat, ending civilized connectivity as we know it. I mean, we are just going to continue to have faster and faster connections with more and more robust devices. So, I mean, it's incumbent upon us to be talking about these issues and developing these skills that are needed to thrive as not only an information consumer, but also sharer and producer. I mean, it's important.
Yep, absolutely so. And then one other article that actually goes along with the advice I give to everyone on OS updates on phones. And the article tells you that there's been a suspected flaw in iOS 14, the latest release of the Apple mobile operating system, that if it's causing a battery drain on your phone, you might need to wipe your iPhone. And every time I say this, like when I'm trying to be helpful on forums and stuff, I feel like I get booed. But if you are going through a major update on a phone or tablet, you should really wipe it and start over again. And because the cloud stores most of the stuff that's valuable on your phone anyways, you're not going to be at a real loss. But chances are the opportunity to install your operating system from scratch is going to lead to much better outcomes than trying to deal with one that was kind of patched together to create the next version. And that's true on Android as much as it is on Apple. I would also note that I also give that same advice to Windows and Mac users. I know it's a huge pain in the butt to reinstall those operating systems, and it's beyond a lot of even power users. But when I'm a Windows user, which is not majority of the time, but when I am, if there's a new version, I don't upgrade. I just wipe and start over again. And again, I'm a nerd, but the speed I get back, right, and for that, the fresh install, the no issues with compatibility, makes it worth it every time.
And again, to just continue to extol the wonders of Chrome, the speed with which you can do a complete wipe, a power wash on Chrome relative to Mac OS, iOS, or Windows, there is no comparison. So That is absolutely true. Let's see. I want to pick up a couple of these AI articles, and then maybe you can either do the security ones look good or the COVID impact.
Awesome.
This is another Mozilla-influenced article. Could you tell that I visited their Twitter recently? This is a report called AI and Advertising, a Consumer Perspective, and it's by Mozilla fellow Harriet Kingaby. And this was released at the end of September. And this could go in a variety of different places, including the tech correction. But this is a pretty extensive report, and I am not going to be tuning into the live webinar one because I registered for it, and it's like 4 a.m. like tomorrow or whatever. I'll be checking out the recording of that perhaps. But this is talking about the potential harms of AI-powered advertising and then thoughts about redesigning the system. And so I just think it's great that Mozilla and the folks at Firefox are supporting this kind of research and these kinds of inquiries, because this is the tech correction. This is the discussion about how do we adjust the technology platforms so that they are hopefully doing a net benefit and not doing significant harm. And then the second one is a little old, relatively speaking. It's a few weeks old, but this is from Vice on September 14th. And the article is, China has been doing mass surveillance on millions of citizens in the US, the UK, Australia, and India. And my big takeaway from this article is, I just don't think most folks that I'm around, and who knows how that generalizes to the population, recognize the long game that China is playing with respect to so many things, to include data about you and me. And of course, the more data that AI systems get, the smarter they get. But these kinds of articles, another hack, another breach. I mean, on the practical level, it goes back to what we haven't said in this show. But if you go back to past episodes, you'll hear it lots. Change your passwords. Use the tools that are built into Chrome and into 1Password and LastPass and these other tools to identify the passwords that you have that have been breached, so that everything can be unique and long. And one day, maybe you and I could be like Jason Neiffer and have all of our passwords changed. He is on a very select pedestal of the few who have walked that walk, and we all need to do it. I mean, there are consequences to using a password which has been, put on the dark web, and most people don't realize it, and it's a reality.
And I'll tell you, a couple weeks ago, one of my last passwords that needed changing was my Spotify password. Turns out, middle of the morning, listening to I like a little Philip Glass while I'm working in the morning. Philip Glass piano solos, the soundtrack from The Hours is a wonderful album. I listen to it all the time when I'm working. It just stopped working. I looked over and clicked. It's weird. It's, you've been logged out. And as it turns out, someone in Russia had logged into my Spotify account. What? And it changed my password. And I acted quickly and changed my password to something that was, it's my new standard's 25 random characters. And then I keep it all under my password manager. Once those passwords are out, people use them.
So I propose, Jason, that we'll include, not necessarily this week, but next week, some of our Spotify favorites and playlists, because
would love to.
It is. I've never heard of Philip Glass. I'm gonna check him out, and
you'll love it.
This is part of the incredible world we live in, folks. I need to write this as a blog post because I'm like sorely falling down on my resolve to blog daily. But COVID and teaching full time is kind of demanding. But like being able to have the access we do to music and this kind of thing, like you hear on a podcast, Jason Neiffer says Philip Glass, and oh wow, I already have a Spotify account, so I can just tell my smart speaker, play that. That completely blows my mind, and I love that. And that's part of the utopia that AI and these technologies are, bringing to us today, amidst and alongside, these significant downsides. But hey, that's what happens with powerful technologies. They get used in, ways that are sort of on both sides of the spectrum.
Yep, absolutely so.
What about either COVID-19 impacts or security? What would you have, Alex?
Let me do the COVID one. We're pretty close to the end today, and I don't need to speak much about this, but a lot of hand-wringing the last week because producers of the next James Bond movie, No Time to Die, and I'll admit I'm a bit of a James Bond fan, going back to the old days, and of course the best Bond was Roger Moore, but ignoring that for a second,
not Connery.
I know. Connery's clearly number 2, but I love the cheesy Roger Moore James Bond. But love the series, great movies. I love the books, awesome stuff. But it's been delayed till 2021, and these are massive blockbusters, huge production costs, huge star power, right? it's going to be pushed to next year, and the U.S. and U.K. chains Regal and Cineworld have announced that they're just going to shut down because it's not worth it for them to stick in the business with this blockbuster not coming out. And I don't know what the list is going to look like, but a lot of businesses and industries will not survive the pandemic, right? And we probably won't know about this until comprehensively until we're able to look at this in the rearview mirror. But the bottom line was that people had stopped going to theaters at the rate they were going to them 20 years ago as a trend in the last 10 years as home theaters became more popular and television was seen as a viable platform for good storytelling. And now if a blockbuster not being released for a matter of months puts the economic viability of an entire industry in peril, you know that some of these industries are simply not going to survive.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well,
should we Geek of the Week it?
I guess we should. We're almost to the top of the hour. Well, actually, I'll throw one more in because I'm seeing our live time. We started late, so it's we've been on for 55 minutes.
Okay, awesome.
One other article under tech correction, and if you don't follow this amazing woman, you totally need to. Her name is Joan Donovan. This is another article that she wrote on October 5th for the MIT Technology Review. It is called "Thank You for Posting Smoking's Lessons for Regulating Social Media." Again, I think this is an outstanding articulation of the issues surrounding what we call on this show the tech correction, that the term that Jason coined. And it's talking about how it took so long for society to recognize that tobacco, big tobacco, needed to be regulated. And she makes the point that it really was about helping people see the effects on other people, because folks would say, oh, well, smoking and tobacco use, it's just a choice, and it's just something that, that person chooses to do, and if it hurts them, then that's no big deal. But it was the whole secondary smoke and then the advertising about that really helped shift public opinion. And so her point in this is that in terms of seeing some broad scale, public opinion changes about Facebook and surveillance capitalism and the surveillance state and the ways in which there's this interplay and these impacts, it really was going to need to shift to the broad impacts and the negative impacts on society, and more than just my personal issues with internet addiction or my teens or whatever like that. So I think she has very prescient analysis. Again, if you don't follow her on Twitter, just a great mind thinking about these kinds of things. And she's quoting former Facebook executives who are saying, they use the tobacco industry's playbook when it comes to addictive products. I don't know if some of those folks were the ones in the Social Dilemma documentary or not, but an excellent article. And I think that this is part of what the work that we need to do. We need to do this work, helping ourselves put our heads around not only how these technologies work, but what their impacts and effects are. And what do we do about it, whether we're encouraging companies to self-regulate or we're going to encourage elected officials to take some stronger action.
Yep, absolutely. Excellent point.
All right. Geeks of the Week.
Sure. I'll start. Great article from Android Police, and I have a suggestion to the masses out there. Last week we announced that Google has released a new Google Chromecast. They're now calling it a Google TV. They've not gotten rid of the casting ability, which is what Wes and I love about the Chromecast, but they added a UI to it that looks a little bit like Android TV of the past. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that if you would like one of these bad boys and you are looking to get cable for around a month, like someone like myself might be doing, I do not get cable right now. I might want to get it because there is an event in early November that I'll probably want access to live news for. You can subscribe to YouTube TV right now for 1 month and get a free Chromecast. I think that's a $50 value, which I think is a really interesting way if you are going to be subscribing to TV anyways. I have subscribed to YouTube TV in the past, so I do not qualify for new subscribers only. I liked it a lot. YouTube TV was really great. It seemed like the best competitor I've seen to having actual cable. But if you are new to it and not subscribed before, you can get a free Google TV.
Awesome. All right. I will overshare, so I'll go quickly. Podcast I picked up today, one of my favorites. It used to be called War College. It's now called Angry Planet. Their latest episode from October 1st is called Proud Boys, the Boogaloo, and Everything in Between. I mean, if you heard the president say the word Proud Boys and you're like, what is that? This is just a great podcast that connects a lot of dots about a lot of stuff going on with some, right-wing, primarily fringe groups. And so Jason Wilson, who has done work for The Guardian, as well as, it's going to slip my mind. Journalist is the one who's interviewed there. Second one. This is pretty interesting. So I'm a Spanish teacher this semester, right? And all signs point that Wes may not be, continuing the language teaching after the semester, but who knows? That's how the school chose to deploy my skills, in the pandemic. And I'm having fun. I get to hide in my room. It's great. So as a result, I have become aware of more language resources. And so the Classical Association of New England has a, quote, virtually unprepared workshop series, which is absolutely fantastic. And these are not just things that are of interest to language teachers. They, some of them are, but remote teaching, some great strategies. So I'll include in the podcast show notes not only the playlist of YouTube videos for the recordings, but also a link to their website where you can register for their continuing series, which goes through the month of October. And the final one I have is a lesson series, 2-part lesson series that I just did with my 6th graders called Launch Wikipedia. And I have utilized John Green's great video from his Crash Course series on navigating digital information. It's the 5th video in the series, and it's called Using Wikipedia. And then also today and yesterday's lessons, it was called Just Add Wikipedia. And so if you don't follow Mike Caulfield, who is Holden on Twitter, shout out to Dave Quinn, EduQuinn, who hooked me up with this. College level, fantastic web literacy resources that Mike has put together. He has a whole series, and I have it linked in the additional resources called Check Please, a starter course that you can take. But I used his video for Just Add Wikipedia, and it's a little different when you do it on the iPad. But when you're checking a source, fantastic to just add the word Wikipedia if you're on a laptop right behind the web URL in the omnibar of Chrome, and you should immediately go to a Wikipedia page where you can read about that source. If you're on an iPad, you actually have to put it before the link. But either way, just a great strategy and a real practical web strategy that we've been learning in 6th grade media literacy.
Great. Thanks, Wes. Well, where can people find you on the Twitter? Or I'm sorry, not the Twitters, the internets.
Well, the Twitters would be W. Fryer, my blog speedofcreativity.org, and my media literacy as well as Spanish lesson sharing website, mdtech.cassidy.org. How about you, Dr. Neiffer?
I am a Tech Savvy Teach on Twitter, and I also help out at the Northwest Council for Computer Education blog.ncc.org. But this here is our once-a-week podcast. This is the EdTech Situation Room. We are here on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central Time, somewhere in the middle of the night if you happen to be in Western Europe in UTC land. If you can't join us live, although please do. We love live viewers and happy to take your comments at any time during the broadcast. You can find us at our website, edtechsr.com, on our YouTube channel. We're on Facebook. You can also download tiny MP3 files from our website, or you can find us wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. Also, you can see every link at our website, edtechsr.com/links, and we oftentimes have articles well beyond the hour of conversation we have per week. If you can't join us live, you can always join us later via the download. But we hope to see you next time live on the EdTech Situation Room. Stay safe, stay savvy. Good night.
Adios.